We want privacy! We want privacy!
Hey, thanks for having us on the show.
It's so awesome to be here. It's great.
So you hate journalists. That's right. And now you wrote a book that reports on the lives of the royal family. So you're a journalist.
Holy shit. He said what?
3 words. That's all it took to set Meghan Markle's world on fire. We want privacy. Spoken in cartoon voices, splashed across TV screens, and echoed through a satirical storm that no amount of palace polish could spin. But what if I told you those words meant as a joke, just exposed a deeper, more uncomfortable truth?
This one brilliantly exposes some of the Sussexes' laughable hypocrisy. Watch.
Well, I just think some people might say that your Instagram-loving wife actually doesn't want her privacy. How dare you, sir? My Instagram-loving wife has always wanted her privacy.
This isn't about a cartoon anymore. This is about a public figure unraveling, a duchess spiraling into a PR disaster of her own making. And the worst part? The damage isn't coming from tabloids, former aides, or royal insiders. It's coming from a cartoon, and that cartoon just might have destroyed what's left of Meghan's carefully managed brand.
Look at this town. There's just something about it. Oh, darling, I think this might be the place.
You really think so? We can have a fresh start here.
You're in America now, and we don't give a shit about you. You're not our prince. You'll never be king. We hate your wife. Stay at home in your $29 million mansion, all right?
Hold on, because what really triggered this firestorm isn't what aired, it's how she reacted after. The episode that lit the fuse is titled The Worldwide Privacy Tour, and what it reveals, between the punchlines, is a scathing indictment of Meghan and Harry's public image. It starts absurdly enough. Cartoon versions of the couple waving "We want privacy" signs while crashing talk shows and doing global interviews. But the laughter quickly turns to discomfort because beneath the jokes lies something far more brutal.
Can we rally him up here and finally have our own privacy?
My love, I will do anything for your privacy.
Sorority girl, actress, influencer, victim.
Yeah, that's totally me.
Meghan's character, reimagined as Maxilla, isn't just loud or clueless. She's toxic. She's demanding. She's portrayed as a chaos agent tearing through public spaces while insisting she wants to be left alone. And the satire doesn't stop there. It zooms in on every contradiction that's plagued Meghan's public story. The Netflix shows, the tell-all interviews, the magazine covers, the curated Instagram posts. South Park throws it all into the blender and serves it up with brutal honesty. It's uncomfortable, it's harsh, and it's clearly hit a nerve. But the real story isn't the roast. It's the meltdown that came after.
It's so quiet and empty here. If we moved her, then people would think we're really serious about wanting to be normal.
It does seem perfect, doesn't it? Isn't it true, sir, that your questionable wife has her own TV show and hangs out with celebrities and does fashion magazines? What are you suggesting?
Instead of brushing it off, Meghan doubled down. According to insiders, she was furious and overwhelmed, spending days in damage control mode. And then came the legal inquiries. The demand to have the episode removed wasn't just bold, it was tone deaf. Because in the world of viral culture, trying to silence satire is like throwing gasoline on a fire. The attempt backfired spectacularly. Suddenly, millions who hadn't even watched South Park in years were tuning in just to see what all the fuss was about.
The couple have been begging for privacy, and South Park has done a parody of this, and apparently it has really upset Meghan Markle.
You've lived a life with the royal family, you've had everything handed to you, but you say your life has been hard, and now you've written all about it in your new book, Win.
Late night hosts, social media critics, and Hollywood insiders piled on. Memes exploded, hashtags trended, and what could have been a forgettable comedy sketch morphed into a global commentary on the fragility of Meghan's image. This wasn't just public backlash, it was public autopsy. And this is where the real story begins. Because Meghan's reaction didn't just fuel the fire, it revealed something far more damaging.
She's apparently spent days being upset and overwhelmed, according to sources, over this parody, which picks apart all of their publicity blitz while at the same time begging privacy.
For years, she's worked tirelessly to craft a narrative of victimhood, resilience, and reinvention. She left the royal family, shed the titles, walked away from the palace, and yet the spotlight never left her. But what if the spotlight wasn't chasing her? What if she's been chasing it all along? The South Park satire didn't invent anything. It merely amplified what critics have been whispering for years, that Meghan's cries for privacy are often drowned out by her own camera crews, that her campaigns for change are wrapped in curated PR, that the person beneath the brand is far less grounded than she wants the public to believe. And here's where it gets worse, because every time Meghan tries to redirect the narrative, it seems to boomerang right back at her.
Would you ever run for office?
No.
Never.
No.
Never. Never.
Well, according to their tax documents, they work 1 hour a week.
Even more telling was the silence from South Park creators Trey Parker and Matt Stone. They didn't apologize, they didn't retract. And that silence, it spoke volumes. In an age where celebrity outrage often forces immediate backpedaling, they held their ground. Why? Because they knew they weren't alone. Public fatigue with Meghan's ever-evolving victim narrative has been building for months. From her carefully curated Netflix series to her strategically timed podcast appearances, every move has felt like another chapter in a performance. And South Park, it called that performance out, loud and clear. But Meghan's furious reaction didn't just confirm the critique, it magnified it.
Oh my gosh, I work so hard and I appreciate what hard work looks like. I like working hard.
And she wants money to just fall into her bank account with little to no effort.
Now, what was meant to be satire is being viewed as something much more damning, a mirror. That's why this moment matters. It's not just about a cartoon, it's about what it exposed. When a satirical episode can cause this level of distress, it forces a bigger question. How stable is the foundation beneath the public image? Meghan has positioned herself as a modern icon, part activist, part royal, part influencer. But icons don't flinch at parody. They don't implode when the narrative slips out of their control. The Maxilla character wasn't just exaggerated, it was eerily accurate to many. The poses, the speeches, the stylized breakfasts, it all felt just a little too real. And that's what makes this story so explosive. Because if the only way your brand survives is by silencing mockery, then maybe the problem isn't the mockery at all. And here's the twist you didn't see coming.
The episode said they're very wealthy. He's been handed everything he has on a platter. You know, they're literal royals. They're living in a multi-million-pound house in Southern California. I mean, really, what grievances do you have that most people can relate with?
Meghan's response wasn't just a misstep. It was a blueprint for self-destruction. Every attempt to suppress the episode only amplified its reach. What could have been a one-week punchline became a multi-week scandal. Instead of letting the moment pass, Meghan tried to control the narrative and ended up confirming every critique. This isn't the end of the story. In fact, it's only the beginning. Because the deeper we dig into how Meghan responded to the satire, the more disturbing the pattern becomes.
You can't sue a cartoon. It's satire. It is what it is. South Park has done episodes on the royal family, on the royal wedding of Kate and William, for instance. So it's not something that they would be able to sue about. And I generally just don't believe it, really.
What looks like a PR slip might actually be something far more dangerous for her brand. A full-scale collapse of public trust. And in just a moment, you'll see why this cartoon controversy has opened the floodgates to everything Meghan's been trying to hide. It didn't take long for the internet to do what it does best. Dig deeper. The South Park episode may have sparked the initial reaction, but what followed was an avalanche. Within days, clips were circulating showing Meghan on stage at carefully choreographed events, giving passionate speeches about authenticity while standing under perfectly placed lighting, reading from a teleprompter. Side by side with the Maxilla cartoon character, the resemblance wasn't just uncanny, it was uncomfortable. It wasn't just satire anymore, it was visual proof, in real time, of how scripted Meghan's public persona seemed.
This particular episode was quite scathing in the grains of truth that it held. You know, I'm not sure how the Sussexes are taking it. Obviously, it is a cartoon, but there's so many moments of truth in that episode that makes it so funny. The episode called what they were doing a worldwide privacy tour, which is obviously play on really what they're trying to do.
Every hair flip, every pained glance, every curated kitchen shot suddenly felt like part of the performance South Park had just exposed. The lines between cartoon and reality were so blurred that many viewers stopped laughing and started believing. And once that switch flips, there's no going back. But this wasn't just a personal blow, it was a strategic crisis. Meghan's entire rebranding effort, from the Spotify deal to the Netflix show to her lifestyle brand aspirations, relies on emotional relatability. Her power lies in the ability to appear vulnerable and virtuous at the same time. But now, every new clip is viewed through the South Park lens, every speech feels like performance art, every public appearance is met with snark instead of sympathy. That's not just bad PR, it's career poison. The very foundation of her media empire, the relatable Duchess, had been punctured by a cartoon scalpel. Her Netflix show wasn't seen as heartfelt. It was lampooned as delusional. The timing couldn't have been worse. She had a soft launch image rebrand in progress, but suddenly she was trending for all the wrong reasons. And the headlines were mocking, not supportive.
What mother or father in the name of sweet Jesus has enough time to create a fruit plate at 6 o'clock on a Monday morning when there's toast throwing around the room?
What's even more damning is how quickly the industry turned. Late-night hosts started referencing the episode in their monologues. Podcasters dissected it in long-form rants. Comedians who had once defended Meghan now openly mocked her inability to take a joke. This wasn't just cultural commentary, it was a shift in tone. Meghan was no longer seen as the underdog trying to find her voice. She was the celebrity who couldn't handle being parodied. And that's deadly in a world where every public figure is fair game. The moment you demand immunity from criticism, especially through legal action, you cross a line, one that makes you look both insecure and out of touch. The reaction wasn't fear or outrage, it was laughter, but not the kind you want. This was the sound of respect evaporating. Even former allies began to distance themselves. Influencers and activists who once hailed Meghan as a symbol of modern royalty started issuing quiet retractions, or worse, public silence.
I nearly entered rehab yesterday. That is the biggest pile of crap I've ever seen on television in my life.
I can't take it anymore. Get out, get out, get out. Uncle, make it end. Make it end.
YouTube commentators created hour-long breakdowns of the episode, and suddenly, Meghan's curated moments became memes. Her sunlit kitchen scenes from With Love, Meghan were spliced with maxilla footage to expose the performative contrast. What started as a cartoon jab had mutated into a full-blown narrative weapon. The public wasn't just laughing, they were dissecting, replaying her interviews, rewatching her Oprah moments, pulling quotes from her podcast. Not to understand her better, but to confirm their suspicions. And what they found wasn't authenticity, it was artifice. And just when you thought the media frenzy had peaked, it escalated again. A resurfaced interview clip from months earlier showed Meghan describing the emotional toll of public scrutiny. Except now, it played more like foreshadowing than a plea.
These two are not sincere people. They say that they want their privacy while going on every television show, writing books, doing 6 hours of Netflix. They're not very likable, and people are tired of them.
But they couldn't have imagined being made a laughingstock by the cult cartoon South Park.
Audiences weren't sympathizing anymore. They were dissecting. Is this real or rehearsed? Became the dominant comment thread. And that's the danger of losing public trust. It's nearly impossible to get it back. The conversation began shifting from, was Meghan hurt? To, is Meghan manipulating the narrative again? And when you're seen as a brand before a person, every emotional beat becomes a marketing tactic in the public's eyes. And that mistrust didn't stop at the fans. It crept into the boardrooms. Industry insiders began leaking reports that Meghan's brand deals were suddenly under review. One executive anonymously told a trade outlet that any public figure who can't absorb satire without imploding becomes a liability. Meghan's value had always been tied to her ability to captivate the public, but now she was captivating them for all the wrong reasons. Instead of aspirational, she came off aggrieved. Instead of empowering, she looked embattled. The satire didn't just bruise her brand, it redefined it.
They're putting themselves on the world stage using expensive PR while demanding privacy, while writing books, while being on Oprah that had 50 million viewers. People who want privacy don't do that. You live your life quietly in privacy. So it's such hypocrisy. I think they did a brilliant job.
Behind closed doors, Meghan's team reportedly scrambled. Multiple PR experts were contacted, statements were drafted and retracted, and there was internal debate about whether to address the controversy publicly or try to wait out the storm. But the problem wasn't going away. Every attempt to regain control only deepened the narrative that she was obsessed with it. Even her silence, typically a strategic move, was reinterpreted as brooding entitlement. In media strategy, perception is everything, and right now, Meghan's was imploding in real time. It became clear that this wasn't just a bad press cycle, it was a reputational event, one that couldn't be ignored or neatly spun. And as Meghan's team clung to talking points and behind-the-scenes damage control, the public watched with fascination. The question on everyone's mind wasn't, will she recover? But what will she try next? Because in the court of public opinion, when you fight comedy with censorship, it's not the cartoon that loses, it's you.
What matters is what we have on the inside.
They nailed it. They nailed it.
I think he goes on to say, so you wrote a book talking about your family. Does that not make you a journalist too? And then they kind of stare at each other, like dumbfounded.
Then came the real turning point, when internal palace sources and former staff began quietly nodding at the accuracy of the satire. They didn't need to go on record. They didn't need to name names. The South Park episode had said the quiet part out loud, and now it was being validated in whispers. Former aides who once worked closely with Meghan and Harry reportedly felt vindicated watching the Maxilla parody unfold. One royal staffer was quoted anonymously saying, "It was exaggerated, sure, but anyone who worked with them knows how close to home it hit." That one quote was all it took. Suddenly, the cartoon wasn't just entertainment, it was evidence. And the idea that this was all just harmless fun? That was out the window. South Park had cracked the image, and the real world poured in through the fractures. Social media lit up with receipts, old footage, leaked clips, side-by-side comparisons of Meghan's real interviews and Maxilla's dialogue. Suddenly, every exaggerated moment in the cartoon had a real-life mirror. Meghan demanding privacy while doing a magazine cover. Meghan decrying the media while selling a memoir. Meghan preaching humility while living in a $30 million California mansion with a team of stylists and media consultants. It all started stacking up like evidence in a trial, with South Park as the prosecutor.
They say they hate journalists. Harry hates journalists. But to pay PR who say what you want and who, shape social perception in your favor while also disparaging and lying about others, thereby reaching their privacy, I think the whole, worldwide privacy tour is hysterical.
This wasn't just a PR problem. It was an identity crisis. When your entire brand is being torn apart by a cartoon and the public finds truth in the parody, it means something fundamental has shifted. But the most devastating blow came from an unexpected direction: Hollywood itself. Behind the scenes, executives and producers who had once championed Meghan's potential as a media mogul started backing away. One industry insider told a well-known podcast, she had one job, control the narrative, and she lost it to a cartoon. That single quote went viral. It was clipped, shared, and reposted by critics and fans alike. It hit because it was true. In the entertainment world, control of your story is everything. And once you're seen as someone who cracks under pressure, your value plummets. Even worse, once you're mocked in Hollywood and can't laugh with it, you're no longer a player. You're a punchline. Even her allies in progressive media began treading carefully. Journalists who had once written glowing op-eds about Meghan's bravery were suddenly vague in their coverage. Headlines shifted from praise to questions. Is Meghan overexposed? The backlash against the Duchess brand. Why Meghan's critics are gaining ground. It wasn't just a media cycle. It was a rebranding, and not the kind she orchestrated. Her silence on the South Park episode had allowed others to define the conversation, and they were doing it mercilessly. And perhaps worst of all, the more she stayed silent, the more powerful the episode became. Because when satire goes unchallenged, it becomes truth in the public imagination.
Meghan, it's just like we see right through your fake behavior, and no amount of saying how kind you are is going to make people think, oh, isn't she so kind? All of the nasty things you have done, we know.
The ripple effect spread fast. One of Meghan's former PR collaborators anonymously told a trade outlet that dealing with her team was like walking through a minefield of ego. That quote alone was damning, but what came next was worse. Meghan's rumored push to get the South Park episode legally suppressed wasn't just laughed off, it was dissected by First Amendment lawyers on national television. You can't sue satire, they explained, and trying to do so only confirms guilt in the court of public opinion. Meghan's image was no longer just under fire, it was being dismantled piece by piece. And then, as if on cue, the public started turning their attention to Harry. If Meghan's behavior was exaggerated in Maxilla, Harry's was painted as clueless, spineless, and tragically codependent.
Harry last year wrote a book called Spare, which smashed his brother, his father, his mother-in-law, his sister-in-law, the media, and many, many others in one giant whinge.
It was just sterile and awful, and I hate her. I'm so sorry, I really do.
Now, I don't know what he and his wife expected from this. Was it pity, sympathy at their hard life, or just the millions of dollars they've earned from betraying Harry's family?
While many laughed at the portrayal, others began asking a darker question. Has Harry been diminished by proximity? Commentators pointed out how much he'd changed since his early days as the rebellious royal. The soldier, the charity champion, the prince who once danced at parties and fought for mental health reform. Now, he was depicted as a whipped sidekick who existed solely to echo Meghan's grievances. And in the eyes of many, the cartoon was kinder than the headlines. That shift in perception was brutal. Harry was no longer seen as the prince who escaped the firm. He was now cast as the man caught in a web of image management, scripted speeches, and carefully curated outrage. And it wasn't South Park making that claim anymore. It was journalists, royal correspondents, and even mental health advocates who once supported him. One psychologist who had praised Harry's early work later commented, "It's painful to watch someone lose their voice by trying to control everyone else's." That stung, because for many, Harry's silence on the satire spoke louder than any royal protocol ever could. Even the Sussexes' past defenders in celebrity circles went quiet. Stars who had once shared the stage with Meghan at women's conferences and philanthropic galas now kept their distance. Some unfollowed, some untagged, others simply stopped mentioning her at all. And in Hollywood, that's not a coincidence, it's a message. Silence is the industry's way of protecting itself from reputational splash damage. If Meghan had hoped to build an empire off her brand, this backlash was tearing it down brick by brick. Because no matter how big the deal or how glossy the documentary, you can't outrun satire that sticks. The Maxilla episode wasn't just a funny cartoon, it was a moment of cultural whiplash. It became a kind of shorthand for everything that felt inauthentic about Meghan's rise in the post-royal spotlight. And the scariest part for her team? It worked because people believed it. The satire landed not because it was absurd, but because it was eerily close to the truth.
There's a conversation with you,
with Harry,
about how dark your baby is going to be?
Potentially, and what that would mean or look like.
My wife is not visibly black, but that's who she is. The way that they speak about her and the way they treat her is incredibly relatable to everybody else of color.
For every exaggerated outburst or tone-deaf soundbite, there was a real-world moment to match. The Oprah interview, the Netflix docuseries, the cookie-cutter podcast episodes about resilience. None of it felt raw anymore, just manufactured. And South Park, with its crude animation and brutal honesty, did what no press outlet dared to do, strip away the filter. And here's the kicker, Meghan's critics didn't have to work very hard. The Maxilla episode had done the heavy lifting. All they had to do was replay the clips, highlight the hypocrisy, and watch the internet do the rest. The narrative shifted in real time, fueled not by scandal, but by satire. And as Meghan's team scrambled behind the scenes, trying to regroup, rebrand, and reassert control, the damage was already done. The parody had gone viral, yes. But what made it stick was how much it revealed. It shattered the illusion. It wasn't about jokes, it was about judgment. And Meghan, for the first time in her post-royal career, was on trial, and losing. It was the silence that said everything. As South Park's Maxilla episode continued to rack up millions of views and reactions across every corner of the internet, Meghan's refusal to respond publicly became its own kind of statement. Normally so quick to issue carefully worded statements or appear on a podcast to steer the narrative, this time she said nothing, and that silence? It was deafening. It felt less like confidence and more like paralysis.
Who just went off on these, what did she call them? Queen's husband was dying, and she went on Oprah and suggested one or both of them are raging racists. She couldn't have cared less. She doesn't care about anyone other than herself, and I include Harry in that. She cares about her image. That's why she's there.
Behind closed doors, crisis meetings reportedly ran all day. Sources claimed her team debated everything, from legal action to emotional damage control, but no solution stuck, because nothing could stop what had already begun. For the first time since stepping into the global spotlight, Meghan wasn't leading the narrative, she was trapped in it. And then came the backlash to the backlash. As Meghan's allies scrambled to contain the fallout, they accidentally made it worse. One former Archwell advisor, speaking anonymously, said staff had been burned out for months trying to maintain her impossible standards for image control. The Maxilla episode wasn't seen as comedy, it was seen as betrayal. Not by the show, but by everyone who believed her public persona. Internally, reports began to leak of screaming phone calls, canceled appearances, and mounting anxiety. Meghan, who had once seemed like a master of media chess, was now playing defense against a crude cartoon, and losing. Every move she made to fix things only confirmed the satire's sting, that she cared more about perception than reality. The emotional tone shifted quickly. What began as public mockery turned into something deeper, resentment. People weren't just laughing at Meghan, they were angry with her. Angry at the contradiction between her messages and her lifestyle. Angry at the constant messaging of victimhood from someone who lives in luxury. South Park had opened the floodgates, but the frustration had been building for years. The lavish Oprah interview, the multi-million-dollar Spotify and Netflix deals, the staged photo shoots, all of it now felt less like empowerment and more like manipulation. The Maxilla monster wasn't fiction. It was catharsis. At the height of the fallout, a clip from Meghan's Netflix series began circulating again, one in which she tearfully said, "I just want to be understood." Except now, with Maxilla fresh in the public's mind, that moment was reframed entirely. It didn't feel raw, it felt rehearsed. The kitchen lighting, the soft piano music in the background, the perfectly timed camera zoom, it all read like a scene, not a confession. Memes exploded. Parody videos appeared within hours. Influencers reenacted Maxilla scenes using her own dialogue. Even her vulnerability had become material for mockery. And when that happens, your message is no longer inspiring, it's just content. But the true moment of no return came during an unrelated charity event in Los Angeles.
I've read Spare. I've read it cover to cover. They are a damaged couple. They are people in trauma.
Oh, we want our privacy and safety, but we'll go be at Beyonce concerts and do whatever we want. Oh, look at him. It's my fox. Oh, yuck. Yuck, yuck, yuck.
Meghan was expected to appear, to deliver a keynote, to reclaim the narrative, but instead,
I can't take it anymore. Get out, get out, get out. Uncle,
Some
make it
claimed
end.
she feared
Make
being
it end.
heckled. Others said it was about controlling the optics. But the message was clear. Meghan, who had once commanded rooms with ease, was now retreating. And in the absence of her voice, the voices of her critics only grew louder. No longer silenced by royal protocol or progressive loyalty, people felt free to speak, and they weren't being kind. By the time late-night hosts began using Maxilla as a running joke, it was too late to undo the damage. The satire had gone mainstream. It wasn't just an internet moment anymore, it was embedded in pop culture. Meghan had become a shorthand for entitlement cloaked in victimhood. Her name, once associated with modern royalty and activism, was now lumped in with celebrity PR disasters. And it didn't take much for the public to draw comparisons. From Ellen's Be Kind meltdown to the fall of Gwyneth Paltrow's wellness empire, people recognized the signs. And Meghan's brand had all the markers. Even more revealing was the way royal commentators responded. Some who had been cautious to critique Meghan in the past now spoke freely. This wasn't satire, one said on a live panel. This was a release valve. For years, any criticism of Meghan was painted as bigotry or institutional backlash. But Maxilla changed that. It reframed the conversation around behavior, not identity. It called out not who she was, but what she did. And for the first time, the public felt allowed to agree. That's what made the backlash hit so hard. It wasn't political, it was emotional, it was personal, and it felt long overdue. And as the fallout intensified, something unprecedented began to happen. People stopped caring about the royals altogether, not because they lost relevance, but because the drama became predictable. Meghan had turned every public moment into a spectacle, every criticism into a headline. The South Park episode didn't just lampoon her, it exhausted the public. People didn't want more interviews or documentaries. They wanted quiet. And in a final twist of irony, the woman who once asked the world for privacy had finally given them a reason to tune out. And yet, Meghan's team still didn't seem to get it. Even after the memes, the late-night jokes, the internal backlash, and the loss of goodwill, their next move was to float rumors of a rebrand, another docuseries, another podcast, another soft-focused kitchen table conversation about healing. But the problem wasn't that Meghan needed a new angle. The problem was that people had stopped listening. You can't sell vulnerability if people think it's fake. You can't talk about privacy after staging global interviews. You can't talk about bullying while silencing critics. The Maxilla parody didn't just mock Meghan, it exposed a pattern, a brand strategy wrapped in victimhood that no longer passed the smell test. And the people, once enchanted, had moved on. Because in the end, that's what satire does best. It exposes what people already suspect but are too afraid to say out loud. And once South Park said it, everyone else did too. Meghan didn't just lose control of the narrative, she lost control of the room. The real damage from the Maxilla episode wasn't the laughter, it was the long silence that followed. Meghan and Harry, once the most talked about couple in modern royal history, suddenly found themselves on the outskirts of cultural relevance, not because their titles were stripped or their projects were canceled, but because the public simply lost interest. The very oxygen of their fame, attention, was being quietly cut off. The satire hadn't just mocked their contradictions, it had spotlighted the growing disconnect between their words and their reality. And the audience, once sympathetic, was no longer playing along. This wasn't just a PR failure, it was a full-blown collapse of trust. Meghan's brand, once centered around empowerment and truth-telling, was now synonymous with entitlement, overexposure, and manipulation. And it wasn't just her critics saying it. Even neutral observers began questioning whether the Duchess of Sussex had anything left to offer beyond carefully staged content and heavily filtered vulnerability, Hollywood moved on, the media moved on, the fans moved on, and in the most poetic irony possible, the woman who built an empire off telling her side of the story suddenly had no one left who wanted to hear it.
If you think about it, Meghan got everything she wanted. She got the husband, she got the children, she got the HRH, she got everything that allowed her to rise up and to have that global recognition that we know how badly she wanted that.
Meghan ruined Harry. Now that the once carefree, fun-loving prince has turned into a miserable moaner, lashing out from the depths of his paranoia at a world he thinks is conspiring against him.
And while Meghan may have hoped to quietly ride out the storm, the internet had other plans. Clips from the Maxilla episode continued to resurface whenever she trended, becoming an unavoidable watermark on every public appearance. Even her most sincere efforts, community visits, charity launches, soft focus interviews, were met with side-eye and sarcasm. Her words, once taken at face value, were now picked apart like dialogue in a bad script. Viewers didn't just question her motives, they expected them to be fake. And once that assumption takes root, no amount of emotional storytelling can save you. But what makes this chapter of Meghan's story truly remarkable is that it was all self-inflicted. The attempt to suppress the South Park episode, the reported legal threats, the internal fury, none of it needed to happen. She could have laughed, she could have ignored it, she could have re-engaged the public with humility, but instead, she doubled down on control, and in doing so, confirmed exactly what Maxilla had portrayed. The overreaction didn't protect her image, it shattered it. Because once the public sees your mask crack, they don't forget. In the months following the episode, Meghan and Harry made fewer public appearances. Invitations slowed, coverage thinned, and quietly, projects were shelved. The once eager production partners now approached with caution, and PR professionals who had once pitched Meghan as the voice of a new generation whispered about audience fatigue. But it wasn't fatigue, it was rejection. The world had caught on to the formula, the victim narrative, the curated intimacy, the endless brand building, and it had grown tired of it all. What was once seen as fresh and brave had turned repetitive and hollow. The Maxilla caricature became more than just a cartoon. It became a case study, a warning to every influencer, activist, and public figure chasing authenticity while manufacturing it in real time. Because in a culture flooded with content, people crave truth. And if they sense you're faking it, even just a little, they won't give you grace. They'll give you backlash. Meghan's fall from grace didn't come from a scandal, it came from a sketch. And that, more than anything, is what makes it historic. For a public figure so deeply invested in managing perception, this was the ultimate loss of control. And now, the question lingers. What's next? Can Meghan Markle recover from being turned into a punchline? Can she rebuild a brand after the curtain's been pulled back so completely? The answer may depend not on her next project, but on whether she can let go of the very thing that's defined her rise and fueled her fall. Control. Because public figures don't get to decide how they're perceived, they only get to decide how they respond. And if Meghan wants to stay relevant, the next move isn't another docuseries. It's a decision to show up with honesty, without the filters, without the handlers, and without the fear. Because the irony of it all is brutal. The woman who begged the world to see her clearly was undone by the one thing she couldn't control, being seen too clearly. No filters, no edits, no carefully lit kitchen sets, just a crude animation that cracked open the illusion and let the public peek inside. And what they saw wasn't evil or even dishonest. It was insecurity, an obsession with image, a relentless need to control every pixel of the spotlight. And in the unforgiving court of public opinion, that's not just unsustainable, it's unlikable.